Get out. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We don't need a useless daughter. I was 16. I remember the clock on the wall more than his face. 11:42 p.m. The red numbers blinking like they were counting down something I couldn't stop. My brother Evan stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes lowered, performing shame like a costume he'd practiced wearing. My mother stayed seated on the couch, hands folded, staring at the carpet as if silence could count as innocence. I didn't do it, I said. My voice shook, but the words were clear. You didn't even ask me. Dad pointed at the door. We already know the truth. Outside, rain hammered the windows. Wind rattled the frames. It was the kind of night you tell your kids not to go out in. The kind of night parents worry. Not mine. I took one step forward. Please, just listen. He's lying. Evan didn't look up. He didn't have to. He'd learned early that lies worked better when adults wanted them to. Go, my father said again. Final. Flat. My mother still didn't look at me. I grabbed my hoodie, my phone, nothing else. When I opened the door, cold air rushed in like it had been waiting. For a moment, just a moment, I thought someone might stop me. No one did. The door closed behind me with a sound that didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed heavy enough on its own. I stepped into the storm barefoot, my heart racing, my head spinning with one impossible thought. They really believed him. 4 hours later, a police officer would be dialing that same house. And when my father walked into the hospital room and saw who was sitting beside my bed, he froze. Because some choices don't get taken back. And this was one of them. Before we go any further, let me ask you something real. Have you ever been punished for something you didn't do? Not questioned, not heard, just judged and discarded? If yes, type I know in the comments. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step to healing. And if stories about resilience, truth, and quiet justice matter to you, make sure you're subscribed, because what happened after that door closed is the part that changed everything. Now let me take you back to what really led up to that night. Before that night, before the storm and the words that erased me, I was already learning how replaceable I was. In our house, there were 2 children, but only one truth ever mattered. Evan was younger, quieter, fragile in the way adults mistake for innocence. If something broke, it somehow broke around him. If rules were bent, they bent in his favor. My parents called it protecting him. I called it disappearing. I was the one expected to understand, to adjust, to take responsibility for things I didn't cause. You're older, my mother used to say. Be the example. So I did. I cleaned without being asked. I got good grades. I stayed out of trouble. I learned early that being easy to manage was safer than being honest. Evan learned something else. He learned that a sad face could outweigh the truth. If he cried, my parents reacted. If I explained, they sighed. When he denied, they believed. When I spoke, they questioned my tone instead of my words. The first lie was small, then another, then another. Each one went and challenged. Each one taught him the same lesson. He didn't need proof. He just needed to sound hurt. By the time we were teenagers, the pattern was solid. I wasn't innocent until proven guilty. I was guilty until I learned to stay quiet. So when my brother finally told the lie that mattered, the one that would cost me everything, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came from a family that had been practicing for years. And that night, they didn't just choose his lie. They confirmed mine didn't matter at all. It happened over something so small, it almost feels ridiculous now. A missing envelope. Cash that had been sitting in my father's desk drawer. Rent money, he said later. Emergency money. Money that suddenly needed a villain. Evan said my name without hesitation. I saw her in Dad's room, he told them. She was upset. I think she took it. That was it. No questions about why I'd steal from the house I lived in. No curiosity about when I'd had the chance. No thought that maybe the money had been moved, or misplaced, or spent and forgotten. My parents looked at me like they'd finally solved a puzzle. Why would you do this? My father asked, already angry. I didn't, I said. Check my bag. Check my room. I swear. My mother shook her head, lips tight. Don't lie. We're tired of this. Tired of what? I wanted to ask. Being convenient? Being responsible? Being the one you didn't have to worry about? Evan cried. That was what sealed it. I didn't want to say anything, he sniffed. But she's been acting weird lately. Always tired. Always angry. I was tired. I was angry. Because carrying blame for years does that to you. My father stood up. I raised you better than this. I remember thinking how strange it was that my entire life, every chore, every sacrifice, every swallowed frustration, disappeared in a single sentence spoken by a boy who had never faced consequences. They didn't search. They didn't wait. They didn't listen. They went straight to punishment. When my father pointed to the door, his decision felt rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for a reason. That's when I realized something terrifying. The lie didn't matter. They just needed an excuse to believe it. And they were ready long before my brother opened his mouth. I didn't cry right away. Shock does that to you. It wraps everything in cotton, makes your body move before your heart catches up. I remember stepping onto the porch, the rain already soaking my hair, my hoodie sticking to my skin. Behind me, the house was warm, lit, safe. The door closed and the lock clicked. That sound landed harder than the rain. I stood there for a second, staring at the door like it might open again. Like my mother would rush out and say this had gone too far. Like my father would realize he'd made a mistake. Nothing happened. So I started walking. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have shoes. My phone battery was already low. Every step splashed water up my legs, cold seeping into places I didn't know could ache. Cars passed, headlights blinding, tires hissing against wet pavement. I hugged myself, trying to stay warm, trying not to think about how fast the world had moved on without me. I kept replaying it in my head. If I'd spoken differently, if I'd stayed calmer, if I'd begged harder, maybe then they would have listened. That's the lie we tell ourselves after betrayal, that we failed somehow, that we could have performed innocence better. The truth was simpler and crueler. They'd already decided who I was. I reached the main road, rain pouring harder now, thunder cracking so loud it rattled my bones. I stepped off the curb, my thoughts spinning, my vision blurred by water and tears I didn't remember starting. There was a flash of light, a horn. The world tilted violently, then disappeared. 4 hours after my parents told me to get out. Everything went black, and when I woke up, nothing would ever be the same. I woke up to the sound of machines, a steady beeping, soft voices, the smell of disinfectant so sharp it made my head ache. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then pain rushed in, fast and unforgiving. My leg throbbed. My ribs burned every time I tried to breathe. My throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming, even though I couldn't remember doing it. "Hey," a woman said gently. "Don't move." I turned my head slightly. She was standing beside the bed, her coat draped over a chair, rain still darkening the edges. Her hair was pulled back, her face pale with shock that hadn't faded yet. "I'm Dr. Laura Bennett," she said. I was the one driving. Memory slammed into me in fragments, headlights, the horn, the impact. "You were walking in the road," she continued softly. It was dark, raining. I tried to stop. Her voice broke on the last word. "You saved her life," a nurse said quietly from behind her. "Another few minutes, and—" She stopped herself. Dr. Bennett never left. Not when the police asked questions. Not when doctors examined me. Not when they wheeled me into a private room to wait for my parents. "They're being contacted," an officer said, clipboard in hand. "Your guardians." It came out wrong. Too sharp. Too empty. They arrived 40 minutes later. I heard my father's voice in the hallway before I saw him. Angry. Defensive. Familiar. Then he stepped into the room. He stopped cold because he wasn't looking at a reckless teenager like he expected. He was looking at his injured daughter, bruised, bandaged, unconscious just hours earlier. And seated at my bedside, her hand wrapped protectively around mine, was Dr. Bennett. She stood up slowly. "I need to speak with you," she said calmly. "About what you did tonight." My father opened his mouth. No sound came out. Because in that moment, the lie that sent me into the storm finally collided with reality. and it didn't survive. My father tried to recover first. That's our daughter, he said, forcing his voice into authority. There's been a misunderstanding. Dr. Bennett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Calm can be devastating when it's backed by facts. A misunderstanding? She repeated. Your daughter was found alone barefoot in a storm with no bag and no jacket, no emergency contact who answered. My mother stepped in then, eyes darting to me, then away. She's difficult, she said weakly. She ran off. I felt Dr. Bennett's hand tighten around mine. She didn't run, she said. She was walking, slowly, in shock. After being thrown out of her home, the police officer shifted uncomfortably. That's not true, my father snapped. She stole from us. We had to teach her a lesson. Dr. Bennett turned to him fully. So your lesson was abandonment? Silence. The officer cleared his throat. Sir, ma'am, we'll need to document this. A minor was injured after being expelled from her home. My father's face drained of color. You called the police? He asked Dr. Bennett. No, she replied. The hospital did. Because when a child shows up like this, we ask why. My mother started crying. Loudly. Dramatically. The kind of crying meant to end conversations. But this time, it didn't work. Dr. Bennett looked down at me. You're safe now, she said softly. You don't have to go back. I hadn't realized how tightly I was holding my breath until then. You can't just take her, my father said. I'm not, she replied. The system will decide. And based on what I've seen tonight, it won't go the way you think. For the first time since the lie was told, fear crossed my parents' faces. Not fear for me, fear of consequences. And that was the moment I understood something important. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs witnesses. I didn't go home. That fact didn't hit me all at once. It came in pieces, the way nurses avoided my parents' eyes, the way the officer spoke in careful, measured tones, the way Dr. Bennett stayed seated beside me long after visiting hours ended. A social worker arrived just before dawn. She asked questions gently. Where did I sleep? Did I feel safe at home? Had anything like this happened before? I answered honestly. For the first time in my life, I didn't soften my words to protect anyone else. My parents sat across the room, rigid, offended, whispering to each other like this was the betrayal. When the social worker finally stood, she didn't look at them. She'll be placed under temporary protective care, she said. Effective immediately. My mother gasped. You can't be serious. I am, the woman replied. Your daughter is a minor who was expelled into dangerous conditions. That alone requires intervention. My father turned to me then, his eyes sharp, warning. You don't have to do this. Do what? I thought. Tell the truth. Dr. Bennett stood. She's already done enough. The decision was made before the sun fully rose. By the afternoon, I was discharged into care, not back to my parents' house, but into a system I'd always been taught to fear. But something unexpected happened. Dr. Bennett didn't leave. She spoke with the social worker privately. She made phone calls. She asked questions that showed she understood the system better than anyone in that room. When she came back, she looked at me and said, if you're willing, I'd like to help. I didn't know what that meant yet. I only knew that for the first time since I was 16, someone was choosing me. Not because I was easy, not because I was convenient, because I mattered. And that choice changed the rest of my life. Dr. Bennett's house smelled like books and coffee. That was the first thing I noticed when I stepped inside, not fear, not tension, not the careful silence I was used to. Just warmth. Ordinary, unremarkable warmth that felt overwhelming because it was new. This is temporary, she said gently, like she didn't want to scare me. We'll take this one step at a time. I nodded, even though I didn't know how to live step by step. I only knew how to brace for impact. The first nights were the hardest. I woke up expecting to hear shouting, expecting to be told I was taking up space, costing too much, asking for too much just by existing. Instead, there was quiet, real quiet. Dr. Bennett didn't interrogate me. She didn't demand gratitude. She asked what I liked to eat, what music I listened to, what I wanted to do after school. No one had ever asked me that last one before. The social workers came and went. Papers were signed. Conversations happened behind closed doors. I wasn't included in everything, but I was included in enough to know this wasn't a mistake. At school, rumors spread fast. Some kids whispered. Some looked at me like I was broken. Dr. Bennett met with the principal herself. "She's not a problem," she said firmly. "She's a student." Something shifted after that. I started sleeping through the night. My grades improved, not because I suddenly cared more, but because I finally had space to breathe. One evening, while we were washing dishes, Dr. Bennett said quietly, "What happened to you wasn't discipline. It was abandonment." The word landed hard, but instead of breaking me, it explained everything. And for the first time, my life stopped feeling like something I had to survive. It started feeling like something I might get to build. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It never does. It came quietly, in report cards that no longer felt like proof of worth, in teachers who learned my name, in mornings where I wasn't afraid of doing something wrong before the day even started. Dr. Bennett never tried to replace my parents. She didn't speak badly about them. She didn't rewrite history. She just showed up every day, consistently, without conditions. When college applications came around, I assumed I wouldn't qualify for much. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and slid a folder forward. "Let's talk scholarships," she said. I stared at her. "Those are for kids who had support." She smiled softly. "No, they're for kids who didn't." I worked harder than I ever had, not out of fear this time, but purpose. I earned my way into classrooms I never imagined sitting in. Education stopped being an escape and became a weapon, not against my family, but against the future they'd predicted for me. I didn't go back home. I didn't reach out. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood boundaries. Years passed. I built a life that didn't require their approval. A career centered on advocacy. Programs designed to protect kids who fell through the cracks like I almost did. When my name started appearing on panels and invitations, I ignored most of them. Until one email made my hands stop shaking. A keynote request. A university commencement. The same university my brother now attended. They didn't recognize my name. They just saw my work. I accepted. Not for revenge. For closure. Because some truths don't need confrontation. They just need daylight. And I was finally ready to step into it. I stood behind the podium, lights warm against my face, rows of graduates stretching out in front of me like proof that time really does move forward. I began the way I always did, with a story about a 16-year-old girl who was told she was useless, about parents who chose a lie because it was easier than listening, about a stormy night, flashing lights, and a hospital bed that became a turning point. I never said names. I didn't need to. Halfway through, I felt it, the shift, the room leaning in, the weight of recognition settling somewhere it couldn't be ignored anymore. Then I said it. That girl was me. The silence was absolute. In the third row, I saw my father freeze. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, and my brother, no longer a child, no longer protected by excuses, went completely still. I didn't look at them for long. I learned something that night. I continued. Blood doesn't define family. Silence isn't strength. And being forgiven doesn't mean being allowed back into someone's life. The applause came slowly, then all at once. After the ceremony, I left without waiting. I didn't owe anyone explanations. The truth had already done its work. Later, I heard my brother confessed. Years too late. My parents wanted to talk. I chose peace instead. Because the girl who walked into that storm didn't survive. She grew. And the woman standing on that stage didn't need revenge. She built something better. If you're listening and you've ever been discarded for someone else's comfort, know this. You don't need permission to leave. You don't need closure to move on. And you are not what they decided you were. You are what you build after. And that is more than enough.